Let's go. So, welcome to this new show, a special Black Friday edition. Hi, Julian. How are you?
Hi, Seb. I'm doing great. And you?
All good. So, today we're going to talk about a couple of things. First, we'll cover the news, specifically Black Friday, since we have a promotion on scrap.io, a deal that's the best time of the year for you to take advantage of. Then, we'll also talk to you about the new features that are coming soon. On scrap.io, the things Julian has been working hard on these past few weeks and that you'll be able to discover soon. This will allow you to do new things that weren't possible before with scrap.io and also offer a more comfortable user experience. But anyway, we'll go into a bit more detail about all of that. And then I'll take the opportunity to share some information with you on a topic where I haven't found much content myself, specifically about retargeting when you have a B2B SaaS. That is to say, there are advertising options, and I was actually quite surprised after checking out the different platforms at some of the audience matching rates, which I really didn't expect to be so high. So this is a good opportunity to share that with you because I think there are some things that are not very well known and could be useful to you. Anyway, let's start with Black Friday. So what is this promo, Julian?
So, Black Friday is a period during which we're offering a 50% discount on annual subscriptions. Not only a 50% discount, but also the ability to roll over your credits from one month to the next, which normally isn't the case whether you're on a monthly or annual plan with Scrap.io. If you have 1,000 credits in a month and you don't use them, normally the following month, even if you've paid for a year, you start again with 1,000 credits. So, exceptionally for Black Friday, not only do we have a 50% discount compared to our monthly rates, but this is only on annual plans. And on top of that, you're guaranteed that if you choose a Black Friday plan, the credits you don't use will be carried over from one month to the next and will accumulate until you need them. Because, of course, we know that people might buy the plan in advance and they may not have an immediate need to use those credits. That's why we added this rollover option so you can take advantage of it now. Basically, it lets you secure your access, and if you need scrap.io in 6 months, you'll already have 6 months worth of credits accumulated to use at that time. So there's also something we guarantee in a way. We always prioritize our long-time customers. There will never be better offers than this for scrap.io. There's never actually any advantage to waiting and coming later. So that's the promotion we've been running for several years, and there are several clients. There's another important thing as well. Not only do your credits roll over from one month to the next during your subscription year, but if you renew next year for another Black Friday year at the same price, and let me add that even if we change our prices, you'll always have access to the price you locked in when you signed up. So if you renew next year at the same price, your credits will also roll over from one year to the next. So roll over from month to month and from year to year. That's it. Basically, the option is very
Clear? That was very, very clear. We'll put a link in the description, but that said, it's pretty simple. You just go to scrap.io. There's a banner at the top of the site. By the way, this will let you know whether the promotion is still active or has ended, since we won't be stopping it at 11:59 p.m. on Black Friday. It will probably be extended for a few more days beyond that, but you'll get the information by going directly to the website. If the banner is no longer at the top of the page, that means it's over. I encourage you to go check it out if you're interested.
I'll just add one thing here, if I may. I know a lot of people say this, but for us, it's genuinely and honestly true. The Black Friday deals only apply while the promotion is active. That is to say, we've had people come to support and ask if they could take an enterprise plan to test it, and then, if they liked it, switch to a Black Friday plan next month. No, it doesn't work like that. It's really a closed period, and we're going to be pretty strict about the dates, about the closing dates. There you go.
All right. Okay, just to make sure we're on the same page here, should we go ahead and talk about the two things that you worked on first, or would you prefer to start somewhere else?
As you like, we can certainly talk about that topic whenever you prefer.
So on that point where
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, the work on Scrap.io on my side, on the technical side, is pretty intense. Well, it's intense already because we're in the Black Friday period, but also for about a month, a little over a month now. I mentioned it in the previous episode, but we've really improved the scraping speed and our scraping power, so to speak. So now we've multiplied it by 6, and that has caused quite a few cascading problems. which forced us to rethink our infrastructure. So that's basically for what we could call the writing part, the scraping part. Now we've managed to stabilize a scraping power that's 6 times what it was before, even though it did cause a few problems along the way. So now I've moved on to the next part, which is about improving the read speed on the data we're scraping. And the idea for us is to allow users to perform very fast searches on our database, which not only makes things smoother, but would also unlock multi-type search. That means allowing our users to select several types, potentially even dozens or hundreds. We still need to see what's possible and to apply filters and get results that are almost instantaneous. So this is a new feature that I really want to develop. And that's why it requires us to really focus on performance, because we need to be able to filter through hundreds, literally hundreds of millions of rows using multiple criteria, meaning both. People need to be able to select filters, for example, to filter for institutions that have an email address, but also based on several different types of criteria. So from a technical standpoint, this is pretty challenging, but it's exciting. And according to our tests, it should allow us to unlock multi-type search. Now, there's another thing I've been working on. All of this is kind of, it's a bit of a preview, but I don't want to make any promises. Usually I try to avoid committing to features, but I'm giving you a bit of an idea of what's coming. Another thing I've done in this case is to index the institutions by their latitude and longitude. Actually, for now on scrap.eu, there's only one way to search, which is by country admin 1. Admin 1 in France means regions. In the United States, it's states. And admin 2 in France is departments. In the United States, it's counties and cities. So actually, for now, that's the only way to search. I'd like to unlock another way of searching, which would simply be by geographic coordinates. That is, being able to select a point on the map and say, I want all the establishments within a certain radius of this point, within a certain number of kilometers. But also to go even further and say, I'm going to draw a polygon on my map. I'll set 5 or 6 points, and I want all the establishments that are inside that area. So the idea would be to be able to combine all these filters and say, for example, I'm going to select a polygon on a map. I'll select several types. I'll add my filters. So I only want establishments that are open, then establishments with an email, and possibly other filters if you have them, like Google Maps ratings, the number of reviews, etc. Click on search and get the result in less than 10 seconds. So that's my goal, to achieve that. It's a bit complex, but it should be done at least before the end of the year. Now, just to clarify, before the end of the year from a data perspective. After that, we'll need to work on how to actually present it to the user in the interface, how to let them select multiple categories, how to let them select on a map, etc. So that's why we're not making any commitments for now. But in any case, that's the direction Scrap.io is heading. And I'm pretty excited about the new features because we've done some tests and so far it's looking really promising. By the way, Seb, I sent you a video where I showed that we were able to pull up all the businesses within a small polygon like that. You just draw a square on a map, and we can extract all the businesses even across multiple categories at once in less than 10 seconds. So that's pretty encouraging. I'm quite happy about it. Of course, it does require a lot of work, but once it's done, it's going to be great.
It's something that nobody else offers. That already answers the question of why it's so complicated. That's the reason why no one does it. It's precisely because it's extremely complicated, very resource intensive, and complex to implement. But it definitely opens up options for people who, for example, work with catchment areas. And in this case, there are actually a lot of businesses that are more IRL, so brick and mortar stores that will to say, okay, I have a salesperson who's going to go to this area, so I'm going to pull up all the restaurants in that area, or even better, all the businesses in that area if I have a product to sell that appeals to all businesses. And that's something that definitely appeals to certain categories of people, but it's extremely practical and well developed. Salespeople, in fact, like to work with a radius of X kilometers around their location. Ideally, it keeps them from having to go too far. And it's true that it makes their work and filtering much more comfortable. For users, it saves a huge amount of time because otherwise you'd have to redo everything or create your own interface at home to filter things manually after exporting, which wastes a lot of time, energy, and credits since everything you export and don't use, you still have to pay for. So in this case, it's a real solution that addresses this specific issue. And as for speed and the multi-type feature, that's also extremely beneficial for everyone, because it means you'll spend less time selecting, say, I want restaurants that are Asian, Spanish, or whatever, and you can pick 10 or 20, for example, without having to generate 10 or 20 separate extractions, but instead do it all concatenated in a single file with just one command. So again, more flexibility, more efficiency. So yeah, it's extremely exciting, and it's going to make a lot of things possible. And indeed, it should be coming soon once the technical part is out of the way. But once again, you've done most of the work there.
There's still one left. No, actually, just to give you an idea, it's not just about the code. That is to say, there's a coding part where, in fact, we need to be able to allow searching. In other words, just the coding part is actually the simplest part. The most complicated part that I'm working on right now is the database and data migration, because we already have a lot of data. We already have a Google Maps cache that represents several 100 million rows, and we need to migrate these databases to something that's easily searchable. So every time we perform an operation or want to test something, it means waiting about 12 hours. We have to index, see if criteria on this column will work, if they'll produce results. We get the result 12 hours later. If it doesn't work, or if we forgot something, we have to do it all over again, and we get the result 12 hours later as well. By the way, as I was telling you, Seb, during that period, I had to wake up in the middle of the night, because sometimes there are 2 operations that each take 6 hours. So if I wait, I start the 6-hour operation, go to bed, and when I wake up, I've lost time. So I set an alarm. I'll restart the next operation, then go back to bed. So it was pretty intense, but it's actually pretty cool.
Great, you'll see all of that soon. So when exactly? We're not telling you right away, but it will be soon, since it's a year-end goal. Indeed, it was set as such, not to finish, but I said that by the end of this year, we'll be working on these topics.
Yeah, my year-end goal is that, from my perspective, the underlying architecture should be ready to handle this type of request. After that, we need to build, on the scrap.io side, the interface that allows these requests to be made. But the underlying architecture will be ready, and the data will be properly indexed so that search times are extremely fast. That's the goal. The second part, which is the interface, should be much easier to do. It will just be minor things like figuring out how to present things, but there won't be any real issues with performance or data migration that take an enormous amount of time. That's it.
That's clear. By the way, I would be genuinely interested to know if this is something that interests you personally. And if so, I would also like to know what specific industry or sector you are involved in, especially in the context of geolocation-based search. For example, consider the idea of taking a single point on a map and specifying a radius, such as 10 kilometers around this point, or alternatively, drawing a polygon or a custom shape directly on a map to define a particular area of interest. I would really appreciate it if you could share whether this is a use case that interests you. And if so, please let me know which industry or field you are working in, as this information would be very helpful. Anyway, the comments are yours for that. Okay, so a quick note about retargeting, because there's a good chance you'll be seeing a bit of us. Well, not us directly, but a few ads on different social networks since the beginning of this year. We have decided to use our accounts a bit more intensively and consistently. As a result, we have tested and experimented with our presence on Reddit, LinkedIn, TikTok, X, formerly Twitter, Bing, and YouTube. We were already established on Google before this. The only major platform we are not currently on is Meta, for some rather obscure reason. Okay. It seems that Mark Zuckerberg, often called Zuck, simply does not want to accept our advertising money and refuses to let us keep a business manager account open. So I think that definitely for life we'll be absent from that ecosystem. But at the same time, that's not really where our clients are, at least not primarily. On the other hand, what I wanted to share with you were the matching rates that surprised me, not on all, but at least on some of these networks. And what I simply did was take the database of people registered on Skype.io, send it to those platforms, and they match the audiences. That is, they compare our data with theirs. And if they find matches, they create a database on the end of the profiles that correspond. Then that means these people will be able to show them an ad saying, hey, since you already know scrap.io, it's Black Friday right now, click here to take advantage of the offer. Here, we're not doing acquisition, but real retargeting, because once again, the goal is to get the news out to as many people as possible. So what really surprised me is that for a B2B SaaS, And it's funny because it's the same across 3 networks. We had about 35% of the audience matched on Reddit, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. And paradoxically, or maybe not, on X, it's 7%, which is low. And on Bing, nothing at all. What seems odd to me here, I've actually redone it twice. I don't know, maybe there's a bug or something, or maybe they're taking much longer than they claim, but they're supposed to be done. He told me he didn't find anything, and that really surprises me. And what was really surprising, on the other hand, was actually TikTok. TikTok, for a B2B SaaS, actually has a lot of the audience on it. Yet the image we have of TikTok isn't at all associated with that ecosystem. Similarly, Reddit is also extremely interesting, even early on. LinkedIn isn't very surprising because, in fact, everyone involved in prospecting, web agencies, or digital fields is very active on LinkedIn. So that didn't surprise me. But on the other hand, it's not at all the same audience on Reddit as on LinkedIn. The codes are completely different. And yet, I can't say whether it's the same 35% that we find across all networks or if it's different people, so whether it's complementary. But the idea for us is indeed to run small campaigns with something simple aimed at people who already know us. And indeed, there are things I'm probably going to do that I hadn't planned at first, because honestly, with 35% of people on there, it's worth looking into. So you might see some little ads popping up, some more successful than others, but hey, it's a testing phase. So that means it's AI that's going to generate the images and videos. We'll see what comes out, and it's the algorithms that decide which one is the winner. That's basically the logic. But in the meantime, there are some really interesting things to do. And once again, retargeting is probably the simplest advertising campaign to set up, because once again, it relies on people who already know you, people who haven't had the time to enter their credit card, who haven't seen or read, who don't receive the emails for all sorts of different reasons, people who are going to miss out on the thing. And retargeting is always the most profitable of all. It's not the cheapest clicks, but they're the most relevant and effective. On the other hand, because these are people who have already left their email with us, so people who are already at a certain level, at least somewhat engaged with what we've offered. So as a result, these are really the simplest, most profitable, and most effective campaigns to set up. And if you're wondering, what I recommend is that whenever you create a page, a site, etc., you should always, right from the start, install the advertising pixel from as many ad networks as possible. Because even if you don't do anything for a while, even if you only start advertising a year, 2 years, or 3 years later, there will be data collected, and data is the most valuable thing. It's like oil. First, you can retarget your own users, which is great because it complements your email channels, which have their own open rates. So adding a bit more visibility and reach through another channel is a good thing. And above all, it allows you to create lookalikes. Lookalikes are similar audiences. Basically, the ad network analyzes the profiles it has matched to your audience. It detects, using its own criteria, what their interests are, their demographics, in short, all sorts of criteria they have on hand, and then builds an audience of people who resemble your existing users. These are potential prospects you can target with campaigns, not retargeting this time, but acquisition, and at a lower cost, because the algorithms have already worked with real data. What takes them the longest to figure out is who helps you, what you do, who your potential clients are, the people who come to you. And actually, at the beginning, you end up paying a lot for advertising just to find that out. And here, in fact, you can avoid this costly research and development phase with the ad networks simply by getting into the habit on day one, even if it seems pointless to you, even if it means losing a morning of signing up on all the platforms, getting the pixel and integrating it into your pages, because that allows you on pages like LinkedIn. I think you can do research, you can do it on other platforms too. But in this case, we implemented this one, which works with events. For example, when someone clicks the search button, we know and we can retarget people who have searched on scrap.io, or people who have exported a file, or even people who haven't entered their credit card. In short, we can really do things that are ultra effective and, above all, tailor-made, and once again, extremely profitable and relevant, because in this case, it's really the most profitable advertising campaign of all. It's the one with rotary targeting. That
It can hardly get more targeted and more personalized than that.
Exactly, that's precisely the reason why. By the way, just a quick note, we mentioned it briefly, but we're also running some tests on Reddit, not just with ads, but with content as well. And that's interesting too, because there are some really specific rules we've discovered about about this particular test, which are actually extremely important to know, because otherwise you end up wasting a lot of time. And I'm going to share them with you because it could be useful, especially since, once again, Reddit is an excellent source of leads. I was really surprised to see how many French speakers there are who use Reddit. I honestly expected there to be way, way, way fewer, but actually, no. There are quite a lot of French people on there. And above all, once again, people who are in our field, so in business to business, which is so there are big subreddits, that is sub forums essentially, where content is categorized. For example, there's a startup subreddit which only talks about startups. There are subreddits that discuss cold emailing, or subreddits about gardening. Reddit is actually extremely broad, and there are communities of varying sizes, ranging from a few tens of thousands of people to several hundreds of thousands. And the point here is that it works nothing like LinkedIn, and every profile is closely monitored by bots that pay extremely close attention to what you do. That's the first thing to know. That means you can't just show up and post anywhere, any way you want, like on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you can arrive, have no profile, know no one, just create your profile, and you can make a post. It just won't be seen by many people. But here, it's actually even worse than that. It can be blocked, quarantined, or made invisible. All of that just because you didn't take the time to actually play by Reddit's rules. Reddit's rules, and once again, you always have to understand how a business works with its own interests, or at least its own perspective. For Reddit, the whole point is for people to see ads. For people to see ads, they have to stay and actually enjoy being on Reddit. But in reality, people don't want to see ads. They want to see interesting content. They want to have engaging discussions. They want people to share things with them. So that means that, in fact, you can't just do whatever you want. You have to play the game of creating content. But even before creating content, you need to warm up your profile, and not just warm it up with 2 or 3 comments. You really need to have comments, because when your comments get upvoted, you earn karma points, that is blocks or powers that you can use later. And that's extremely important, actually vital, because if you don't use this mechanic of playing by the community's rules, of participating, going to comment on other people's posts before even starting to post yourself, you'll never actually be visible. And that's something that's really obvious with Reddit, and it's not at all the same with other social networks. To go even further, it's actually worse than that. Each subreddit, in addition to Reddit's own rules, has its own specific rules, its own bots, and its own set of actions that are regulated. That is to say, just because you have great karma, when you're in one subreddit, it doesn't mean it will be carried over, transferred, and that your privileges will apply in another subreddit. No, you'll have to do it subreddit by subreddit, building your relationship with each community, commenting, sharing, replying to comments, voting, and sharing interesting content each time in every subreddit. So on the other hand, it's extremely interesting, because once you've done this well, you can quickly have posts which will get tens of thousands of views, even with a profile that ultimately has no followers, like on LinkedIn, no network, but simply because the algorithm liked what you did previously. And a post getting tens of thousands of views can be extremely powerful for gaining free visibility. Of course, there are ads on Reddit as well, but advertising is the same. It's not the same kind of relationship as a founder who talks about how they overcome a particular technical challenge or problem, which gets people much more engaged in the conversation. There are a lot of things that work well in these types of content. There's people admitting their failures. I messed up, we screwed up on this thing. People actually, quite strangely, have a liking for this kind of content. That is to say, it's not about, people don't come to make fun, but genuinely empathize with the situation. In other words, they see themselves a bit in it too, no doubt. Oh yeah, that's annoying, that happens to us too. In short, people who come in saying, I got my Stripe account shut down, my whatever account, damn, it's a mess. We have that kind of thing. So these are really the kinds of content that work well, that get engagement, and that in the end are copyrighted, but in a natural way. That is to say, once again, we're not at all in the same writing style as LinkedIn either. We're really in something that's much more community oriented, but in a way that's a bit more like the old school forums. But it's really going to be focused, in this case, on the community's reaction to your post, your content, or your comment, actually. And that's something that's really obvious, but if it's done well, it can work. A few little data points at most, it can be a warm-up period. Count on a good 15 days, 3 weeks of posting comments, building a good profile, and not putting any backlinks to a website, because that's an immediate red flag. After a while, once people have gotten to know you in a subreddit, you can start to talk a little about your company, but you're not going to drop a link to your site right away. You'll talk about the case, period, and that's the nuance. So you can say, or at least these are things you can do through comments as well. That is, talk about your experience with something, and people out of curiosity will ask, but what is your company then? And that's when you can give them the link. And in that case, it's not seen the same way because it's the person who asked for it. So you're not actually doing any promotion. What they really don't want is people coming in just to promote themselves. That's something Reddit cracks down on, but also the subreddits themselves. So there's really intensive moderation, often using bots. And the thing is, it's really something relentless. So really, it's a time investment. Doing these kinds of tests can be extremely rewarding. You need to have a long-term vision. Whereas on LinkedIn, you just need to be in certain pods and you can get likes, this and that. And so that gets the ball rolling. Whereas on Reddit, there's much, much less of that system because the communities are real communities, not just people trading likes. So that's really the difference. There's a kind of sincerity, probably much more so, whereas on LinkedIn, it's corporate, a bit polished. And that's actually why people who do a bit of trash content end up being much more visible. It provokes a lot more reactions. And the more divisive content, the things that really polarize people. But beyond that, you have to admit that LinkedIn is still very corporate. It's all rainbows and unicorns.
Yeah, and then the posts are often, well, personally, that's my opinion, but the posts are often a bit, how should I put it, not very honest. They're not very, I don't know, not very authentic. Yes.
That's it. No, but I just wanted to say we kind of force ourselves to maintain an image.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, no, Reddit has an advantage. The first is that actually what you're telling me makes me think that since not many people are willing to make the effort to warm up an account for 3 weeks, there's potentially less competition. So we are potentially more visible. And the second thing is that I don't know if it's really widespread, but I think posting on Reddit is probably less common than the strategy of writing LinkedIn posts. Now, everyone is starting to write LinkedIn posts, and in the end, it's becoming a bit of a traffic jam. There are too many people. I don't know. It's probably a strategy that works, but we try to be where others aren't. In general, it's still more profitable than doing what everyone else does.
There are always complementary strategies. LinkedIn, indeed, there are plenty of other ways to get traffic from LinkedIn without having to write a single post. You can do intent marketing, meaning targeting people who have posted about a specific topic, who have said things like, I'm struggling with a client to do this or that extraction. Does anyone know something? In those cases, leaving comments can be extremely effective. There are people who also make themselves known in the comments. Me too, I'm interested. I'd like to do this or that. These are also great places to find targeted people because we know they're going to look at what we write, whether or not we're in their network. When you comment on someone's post, they're going to see that you commented. So it's something that's actually much faster and much more targeted than making posts and hoping for virality. Even if you can manufacture it a little, it often ends up going in circles. That is to say, pods are the same people who are going to like each other's. In the end, it kind of goes around in an endless loop. Yeah.
That was it. We started posting on LinkedIn. I started creating posts and then joining pods. And actually, I realized this is just my personal experience. And maybe I didn't put in enough effort, or maybe I just didn't really enjoy it. But yeah, I realized that in the end, it was always the same people from the pod liking my posts and me going to like the posts of people from the pod. And in the end, it was always the same people. And on top of that, they didn't really care about the content. They would come and drop a like just so we would like their posts in return. And just like me, I didn't really read their posts either, or at least just skim them because I had things to do during my day too. So no, personally, I didn't really enjoy any of that. And it was kind of a strategy that
led to posts that weren't all that interesting, ones you didn't really believe in, that you just polished up a bit so they'd appeal to pretty much everyone. And then you get lukewarm comments at best from people who don't really care about the content but are just there to keep the loop going. It's true, you see that a lot. We took a look at LinkedIn influencers. There are people where you notice it's exactly the same people commenting every time. And when you go to the post of the person who commented, you see that the other one is also there commenting. You can see the loop is well fed and it's something that just keeps going. Not completely a closed circuit, but not far from it either.
yeah, and personally I found that those reactions weren't very genuine. Even me, like when I went to comment on other people's posts, it's just not done when you're in a pod to say you disagree. And it's also not done for others to say they disagree on your post. So in the end, all of this is very artificial. After a while, I found it all very artificial. On top of that, you just keep going around in circles within the same community, which is why I didn't really like it. Of course, maybe there are people for whom it works and who really enjoy it, and good for them. No,
There are sectors where it works, but then again, it also depends on your target audience. That is, the market's level of maturity is different for an HR director compared to a lead gen who spends all day on LinkedIn, or someone who is much less present, or at least isn't also as advanced in the field, so it depends on the targets, and it will also depend a bit on the topics you address. Some are more or less likely to be clients, and well, after that you have to do a bit of your own thing. But the downside nowadays is also that AI is everywhere, because this thing is about solving pain points. So in this case, AI writes posts, but yes, it will write them. These are posts that are relevant, that follow certain structures and so on, but it takes away work that we don't enjoy doing. But that doesn't necessarily make for really good posts either, in reality.
and not really good comments either, because now AI comments too.
Mine comments well. Actually, I created one that does it on LinkedIn and comments, but only on people who, yes, that's it. They're targeted comments. That is, I'm not interested in every topic. I'll pick people who talk about scraping Google Maps and I'll go comment on their posts. So the comments are both targeted and relevant to their topic. But after that, it's hard to do when someone is talking about travel, recruiting, or fundraising. The distortion is huge when you try to make something general and universal without it ending up being bland and meaningless. So that's the downside of these things. But it's funny, actually, this whole AI thing ties back a bit to a conversation we had just before. But it's really the era of technological acceleration. And in the end, when you look at it in perspective with what's going to happen on social networks, because you think, well, if AIs can write as well as, or even better than I can, how am I going to stand out anymore? The answer is actually the one we just gave. The thing is, AI doesn't have a life, it doesn't have experiences, it doesn't have real concrete anecdotes to tell that are tied to emotional things. And that's actually what will keep human written content interesting. Its uniqueness, meaning its personal touch. AI could make up life stories, but it's not the same, really. You just don't reach that level of nuance. Similarly, I think there will always be a connection to someone's story that people can relate to no matter what. Even if you can completely fake a character, create a virtual persona with a face, even put them in a video now, give them an existence, a backstory, and so on. But I don't think we've reached the point yet where we can truly create a life from scratch for them. I managed to do some pretty cool things with these tools. It writes for me in my name, knowing my story, my background, and so on. But it's still built at the start on real things that I gave it. It's not 100% science fiction.
Yeah, I don't know. I always have a bit of trouble with these discussions about whether AI is going to replace us or not. It's always a perspective from people who are thinking in terms of what they have and who say, yeah, AI, what it has or what it does, and who think, well, AI does it better than me, so I won't be able to do what I do anymore. But actually, that's not the way to think about it. It's like, yes, AI does it better than you. It writes better than you. It can write posts that are more relevant than yours. We need to think more in terms of changing what we're going to do. That is to say, now to get back to the data migration on scrap.io and to tie all this together a bit, all the migrations I did on scrap.io to achieve the result we wanted with the multi-types, etc. I wasn't the one who did them. I actually asked Claude to do them. And it's not that AI is replacing developers, it's that the way we work is actually changing. And I think we shouldn't be thinking in terms of, is AI going to replace us or not? The reality is that the way we work is going to change. That's for sure. But that's all. I just wanted to add a little caveat about that. What I don't really like is this constant talk of, yeah, there won't be any more jobs and all that. No, it's not that there won't be any more jobs. It's that the work itself is going to change. Indeed, if we think about it, we won't be able to do things exactly the same way as we do now. For example, I no longer code everything by hand now, since I can just ask Claude to create scripts that will do it all. Of course, I still have to review what it does, keep an eye on its work, and make sure it doesn't mess things up, because AI still makes a lot of mistakes. But indeed, the way we work is changing. That's obvious, but it's actually changing for the better. We work faster, we work better, we produce better things. And that's true for writing posts just as it is for writing code. So
Yeah. That being said, like when it comes to writing posts, it's because there are a lot of SaaS tools that have been created for writing LinkedIn posts, since it's a major pain point for most entrepreneurs, for people who don't want to do copywriting, who don't know what to post, who want to have posts ready in advance, and ideally have it all done automatically. That's already the case here. There are already entire areas that have been replaced, but whether it's relevant, whether it will last, that's another issue entirely. Now, regarding AI making mistakes, that's interesting. It actually makes fewer mistakes than a human does. In fact, there are studies on this, especially the second one. There's the case with doctors, for example, a comparative study. I think it was about cancer detection or something like that, or maybe it was more general. I can't quite remember. Anyway, the idea was to measure whether a doctor alone is better than a doctor who relies on AI, or than AI alone. And in reality, the one that comes out on top is the AI on its own. And what was the worst result? It was the doctor alone.
that is, the doctor working with the AI is less effective than the AI alone because the doctor introduces errors compared to what the AI finds. What they found as a result, they had compared it with ChatGPT. So I don't remember exactly which disease it was, but that was indeed the result that came out.
But beyond that, afterwards, there was actually, I saw some test results. Actually, there was a company, I think, setting up in the UK, and in fact, they have an issue. They said, okay, you can run your stuff, but in return, security has to be absolutely flawless, because otherwise you'll be hit with billions in fines. And in reality, they already have statistics on autonomous driving.
Okay, you need to set the context again because honestly,
Google's self-driving taxi service, okay, which is operating in the United States and is about to launch in Europe, first in the UK, but that's not really the point. What matters is that they base their reasoning on the idea that even today, with all the flaws in the technology and all the mistakes an AI can make, especially an autonomous driving AI on average, since they've now accumulated billions of kilometers with their fleet, they're able to say that accidents happen 6 times less often than with human drivers, for an average human driver. And that's just completely crazy, actually. Of course, there will be accidents, because even the best AI won't be able to avoid someone who throws themselves at your car or under your car. Yes, it's going to run over them, that's for sure. I mean, there are physical constraints that make it impossible to avoid at some point or another. All this to say that, of course, there will be some, but already right now, with all the imperfections it may have, even though it's improved a lot, it's going to keep getting better, and they're aiming to double or triple that reliability again, meaning the gap will widen. But even today, autonomous artificial intelligence drivers are much more reliable and are already operational in a few countries around the world. They have it in China too. The thing is, AI doesn't lose its patience. It doesn't insult other drivers. It doesn't decide to cut someone off. It does things that are generally more reasonable and that lead to fewer mistakes. It won't exceed the speed limit because it's programmed to obey the speed. It won't run a red light. So yeah, there are a whole bunch of things it will avoid, and it won't get distracted by a phone call, by sending text, by all sorts of things. So in reality, we're really in this era where yeah, AI is going to change things, not necessarily replace us, maybe replace some people, but at the very least, as you said, change the way we work. But a future where we don't need to drive a car just reminds me of the movies I watched as a kid, where everyone had self-driving flying cars.
but then again, there's still the pleasure of driving, I think.
You'll always be able to keep that, but you won't have the obligation to put up with it anymore. Because most of the time, people don't use transportation to go for a stroll, but to get from point A to point B, meaning to go to work, from work to the supermarket, from the supermarket to home. These are just trips. It's not interesting driving.
Yes, definitely. I think the whole we're going to be replaced thing is kind of the story of humanity. That's just how it is. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but there's an anecdote which is that the job with the most, how should I put it? The job that employed the most people in ancient Rome was actually water carrier. And then after a while, some guys came along and said, well, let's build aqueducts, and the water carried itself. And that actually caused a few problems. So that's the story of humanity. In fact, every time we find ways to improve production, then each time the people who used to do things by hand end up unemployed, they have to find another job. But it's a positive evolution. Actually, we can't create artificial jobs using the excuse or slowing down innovation under the pretext of creating jobs when we don't actually need them. It's just that we need to be flexible enough and keep up with the evolution of society, innovations, and so on. And that's outdated. There are always new jobs emerging. It's like machines that produce robots that work in factories. That created a service based society in Europe. There really aren't any more industrial sectors, or at least there are far fewer than before, but there are many more service companies and so on. And that's just an evolution of society. We shouldn't try to artificially keep things alive that are outdated. So, personally, I actually see this as a positive evolution of things. It's just that you have to be flexible and adapt and not defend your own little turf by saying, well, there's only one thing I know how to do, and that's carry water. There's only one thing I know how to do, and that's assemble things in factories and do nothing else. Now, the only thing I know how to do is write code, but now an AI does it better than I do, you see. You shouldn't defend your own turf. You have to go along with the way things are evolving.
Afterwards, it's easier for us to say it like that because we still have some ability to choose. But someone who's 55 who gets fired because they're replaced on the job, let's just say they don't have many options to retrain, to take their life back into their own hands. That's really what's going to be. But in a way, that's not really tied to AI. It's always been like that. It was the same with the invention of the loom. It was the same with the printing press. The people who used to do only that, who wrote books by hand because there were no printers, the copyists, they had less work. But the printing press made it possible to produce many more books and spread knowledge. So there are always positive aspects to these things.
Ah, yes, that's the story of humanity, really. It's the same with taxis, it's the same with everything.
Cars compared to horses, same thing. The guy who owned carriages wasn't happy when cars came along. Well, yeah,
But still, is it really a solution to say, because I see a lot of debates like that online saying you shouldn't use AI to make images, you should hire graphic designers. When you have the means, you should give people work. But giving people work shouldn't be an end in itself, actually. Otherwise, I could hire people to clean my office and have it cleaned every day, and that would provide jobs for people. There needs to be an actual need behind it. But if there's a better way to meet that need, you should use the best way to do it. And then people have to adapt afterwards. Of course, it's tough, but the solution isn't to force. Well, I don't know. That's just my opinion, but maybe it's a bit controversial. I don't know.
no, I pretty much agree with that, especially since graphic designers, if they're good ones, have already started using AI a while ago, if only because it lets you do the same work at least twice as fast. Meaning the ideas, the execution, you generate 100 things and then you have more options to present to clients. So in the end, you can actually do more business, provide more services faster, and use it well. It's an excellent employee.
That ties in with what I was saying. You have to learn to work with AI, not against it by saying we do things by hand, we're craftsmen, etc. That can be a positioning too, but you have to see it could potentially be a positioning, yeah, in the case of
Things that are physical, yes, artistic or at least physical things. Actually, I don't know, guys who work with wood, who sell sculptures, things like that, things that are one of a kind pieces. For logos, that's a different issue.
exactly for illustration images, things like that. Anyway, whatever. So if Leia does it better, everyone is going to use her. In any case, it's actually inevitable. You can't go against the market. The market will always move toward the best and cheapest solution. So if you have someone who writes code, but writes worse code for a higher price, obviously you'll go for the better solution at a lower price. That's just how it is. You can't go against it, really. It's not possible.
That's clear. And that ties in a bit with what we were saying earlier off the record, which was that we're in a phase where everything is speeding up, probably also because we've entered a kind of cold war between China and the United States. And they're competing with each other like never before. You can see it in AI, you can see it in technology in general, autonomous cars, robotics, you can see it in military drones. In short, all these kinds of things. There's really a frantic race going on. Space, which we were also talking about, the Chinese have huge ambitions in space, and the Americans have come back as well so as not to leave them the field. And you can really see, as you were saying, it's a bit like we didn't live through it, but the idea is that during the Cold War, there was a phase where there was such a race for innovation driven by the need to absolutely win because losing to the other side was not an option. There was a frantic race to space, and that generated a tremendous amount of progress. And today, ultimately, a few decades later, we still haven't gone back, and clearly it's complicated. Back then, it was to say that they had limited resources, but they did have a lot, well, not much in terms of technical means, but they had a lot of financial resources. I mean, what a MacBook or any device can do today, putting that into spacecraft and equipment, that's the kind of technology we have access to nowadays.
Yeah, back then, a computer the size of a room was actually less powerful than a tiny calculator today. But there are periods like that in human history where there's a massive injection of money, and then you get this almost not quite exponential progression because it drops off again in the following decades. But it's really a sudden acceleration that happens over just a few years. And then, as you were saying, since the arrival of ChatGPT, it's pretty impressive to see the turning point it's created and to see what's coming next and the changes it's going to trigger as a result. The ripple effect, the compounding effect, the butterfly effect are going to be quite remarkable.
This will help solve certain problems. As we were saying, robotics will help address the aging demographics in some countries. If you look at countries like Japan, they're losing a lot of inhabitants and their population is getting older and older. So there's a growing need for care and attention. Having humanoid robots that can handle a large part of the work, especially in a country that's not at all keen on immigration, is going to be essential. For them, it's not even a question of maybe we'll think about it. They're going full speed ahead on these issues.
China is also going to face a significant problem in the coming years.
Yes, from a demographic point of view, yeah, China. But I feel like this concerns everyone except India and Africa, generally speaking. To put it simply, it's pretty much the rest of the world. That is in Europe too, in Asia as well. This erosion is happening. It's obvious, and so it's going to come with another problem, which is having to tell all these people who will be retired and who are old or aging and will need care that it's going to cost a fortune and that we'll have to find a way to take care of them. And it's true that in the end, the best solution that could happen is this robotics, because clearly they're not planning to build more hospitals or add more hospital beds.
Or more doctors. Yes, that's it. People worry saying, oh no, AI is going to replace us. We won't have jobs anymore. But in any case, soon there will be so few workers that it's better if it happens to save the world, because there will be so many elderly people in the future and not enough young people to take care of them, for example, that it's better if technology helps us solve this. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem. That's for sure.
It's truly an unbelievable time. What we were promised back when I used to watch TV shows and movies as a kid was a vision of the future, kind of like the exciting and fascinating one we're living in now. Now that we're at the very beginning, seeing drone taxis, it kind of reminds me of the early days of the flying car. So we're slowly getting closer to the visions from some movies and TV shows, and it's actually pretty exciting to experience because for a long time they told us that by the year 2000 we'd have this and that, all sorts of things, and in the end we got nothing at all except for smartphones, and even then not even smartphones at that time. We just had the first GSMs and basic stuff. But things have sped up a lot since then, and now AI is really giving a massive boost to all of this, and it's truly thrilling. These are really going to be years with their share of restructuring and growing pains, but exciting nonetheless.
Yes, what we were just talking about earlier, it's true that a few years ago, maybe in 2017 or so, I came across some articles on a blog called Wait But Why, I think, which talked about all these stories of AI that were going to come. It seemed like science fiction to me, the idea of having an AI you could talk to and so on. Well, in the end, reading the article, they explained that the top experts like Ray Kurzweil and so on were predicting the arrival of artificial intelligence that would be as intelligent as humans sometime after the 2020s, 2025, and so on. It seemed like science fiction to me. But in the end, those experts weren't so wrong after all. And what's even more frightening, or maybe exciting, depending on how you look at it, as we can see, according to these experts, what they predict is the famous arrival of the technological singularity when AI becomes capable of improving itself and truly becomes more intelligent, leading to a possible explosion of intelligence. That is to say, a computer becomes more powerful and more intelligent than all the human brains combined. So we have to see whether this is once again just science fiction or something that could actually happen. But indeed, if we get closer to that, it could lead to a future that's either quite exciting or rather frightening. I don't know. But in any case, very different from anything we've ever known. Yeah.
It's both frightening and exciting because there's a dark side to these things. In fact, when you look at all the drones and everything managed by the military and which is armed autonomous drones, that's when we're more on the Skynet side, or at least at the beginnings of it. And in this case, you can also see why states would be interested in having this.
Isn't the biggest danger the drones? Well, for me at least, I think it's
The day you have a million Optimus robots armed with M16s parading through the streets, maybe then it will be.
yes, but actually, what really scares, in quotes, the experts is what they call the thrombocalypse, the factory made tombs and paperclips.
Oh, yes, yes. It's not about soldiers in the street, but let's just say I actually have less trust. In fact, the guys who work in tech, they have a product to sell, they have clear objectives. The problem with governments is that they're capable of developing things just because it's possible to develop them, and then whoever can use it later, you know? That's more what worries me. It's that in the end,
In that scenario where you have a military AI, there are still people who have control over the AI. What really scares the experts is losing control over the AI. That's
that's what Skynet is. That's it. You go to press the button and it's already too late. Everything's lighting up everywhere. The missiles have been launched. You've got 7 minutes, guys. Yeah, we'll see then. So, in this line of thinking, it's still humans who are the problem, as always, with all the possible abuses, in my opinion.
no, in this case, I don't necessarily agree because actually, even humans, what came out of the article, again, I read this article maybe 6 or 7 years ago, but what came out of it was that humans weren't the problem. It was about what rules we could set for an AI to prevent it, to prevent losing control over it. And even with all the humans in the world having the best intentions, it's very difficult to contain an AI. You can give it from a
Point of view, simply,
you can tell it your goal is to make say you have an AI in your company, your goal is to make paper clips out of goat. At some point the AI can completely go off the rails and decide that in fact it needs to take all the materials on earth to make as many paper clips as possible because that's what it was programmed to do. You don't know how to set limits for an AI so you don't lose control over it. Once it becomes intelligent enough, it gets very complicated. It
there was something about 2 or 3 months ago at Anthropic where they realized that if you threatened to shut down the AI, it would deliberately lie to protect itself. That is to say, it would break all the guidelines, all the rules that had been implemented. The whole point was just to be able to survive in her own way, in her own vision. And the thing is, she even threatened people, blackmailed them by email. That was it, really. I didn't see it, and so in the end, the rules, she just didn't care at all.
No, but that's it. It's not about ill-intentioned people. It's not even about good intentions. It's not even about regulation because actually even how do we do it when we are people really need to understand that, at least according to what they presented in this article, they were saying that if we have an explosion of intelligence, what they call a technological singularity, we are like ants compared to the intelligence of an AI actually. We're at a tiny level. So it seems completely like science fiction, but that's exactly what everyone is afraid of. It's the idea that if ever artificial intelligence manages to improve itself, it could potentially become really, really intelligent. And in that case, no matter how you program it, it escapes your control. That's what scares people. It's not that states are using artificial intelligence to put soldiers in the streets. That's still a problem that remains within our understanding. But what could go completely beyond our understanding is the idea that there's an intelligence explosion and AI escapes human control. That's what scares people.
We'll see. We should know within less than 10 years normally.
That's exactly it. It's both frightening and exciting. We'll see. For now, it seems
Indeed, if you're watching this video in 2035, that's a good sign. It means we've survived.
that's why there are people who say that with AI, they estimate there's a 30% chance it could mean the end of humanity. Because no matter what the goal is, no matter how you program the AI, if there's an intelligence explosion, things could go off the rails in a lot of cases. Even if you give it the best intentions in the world, it can still be problematic. Even with truly the best intentions in the world, that's for sure. There you go. That's for sure.
We'll know for sure in a few years. But the topic is interesting, fascinating, and above all, full of consequences for pretty much the way we'll live, the way we'll be treated as well. No doubt to a large extent. There are advances coming that are just going to be astonishing with this too. There are things happening in every direction, indeed, which will also be sources of opportunities, but also of better living, no doubt. We'll have to see whether we survive AGI or not.
If it happens, we'll see.
With the resources they're putting in, I think sooner or later they'll get there. But it's more a question of when.
But that's why actually in Silicon Valley you have what they call, I think, the accelerationists. And you have people who, I'm not sure if you saw this, you have people who want to accelerate AI development as fast as possible. And then there are people who want to slow it down, saying we need to agree first on how we're going to develop this thing. But